Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirala Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Parshas Vayera, Sicha Alef, and the topic of the Sicha is that this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayera, and last week's Parsha, Parshas Lech, both speak about Avram Avinu. And there are 6 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, point out that this reflects 2 stages in the Avodah of Avram Avinu. Number 2, present a teaching from the Zohar about the difference in the Gilui to Avram between before and after Bris Milah. Number 3, ask a question on this teaching of the Zohar. Number 4, present a teaching from the Alter Rebbe from Torah. Number 5, based on this teaching in Torah, answer the question that we asked on the Zohar and explain the first point about the 2 stages in the Avodah of Avram Avinu. And number 6, present the Hira in Avodas Hashem. Razal said that Sefer Bereshis is called Sefer HaYashar because Zeh Sefer Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Shenikru Yisharm. Sefer Bereshis is called Sefer HaYashar because it's the Sefer of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov who are called Yisharim. However, even though generally Sefer Bereshis is connected to all 3 of the Avos, meaning that the whole Sefer, which is called Sefer HaYashar, is connected b'pnimius to all 3 Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who are called Yesharim. But nevertheless, when looking at it in detail, so then there are Parshas which mainly, at least in a revealed way, speak of one of the 3 Avos. Now the Parshas that are especially connected to and speak about Avram are Parshas Lech Lecha and Parshas Vayera. And since these 2 Parshas are divided into 2 Parshas, even though they both speak about Avram Avinu, so this indicates that they reflect 2 Parshas, 2 dimensions, 2 aspects in the inyan and greatness of Avram Avinu. And since the greatness of Avram Avinu is his Avodas Hashem, so these 2 Parshas reflect 2 levels in the Avodas Hashem of Avram Avinu. Now the main difference regarding the greatness of Avram between Parshas Lech Lecha and Parshas Vayera is that in Parshas Lech Lecha it speaks of the level of Avram Avinu the way he was before the mitzvah of Bris Milah. It's just that at the end of Parshas Lech Lecha, it relates how Avram was commanded to do the mitzvah of Bris Milah and how he did it. But outside of that, Parshas Lech Lecha speaks of the level of Avram Avinu the way he was before Bris Milah. And in Parshas Vayera, it speaks of the level of Avram Avinu the way he was after Bris Milah. And this difference of before Bris Milah and after Bris Milah, which are 2 different levels and are therefore divided into 2 different Parshas, is also reflected in the names of these Parshas, Lech Lecha and Vayera. And so this is the task of the Sicha, to explain what are these 2 levels of Avram Avinu, and how they're connected to being before and after Bris Milah, and how they're reflected in the names of the Parshas, Lech Lecha and Vayera. In order to explain this, we're going to go into a side discussion, and then afterwards we're going to come back and explain this first point of the Sicha. So it says in the Zohar that before Avram's Bris Milah, the level of his nevuah was Hoya Dvar Hashem al Avram b'machazeh, was on the level of a machazeh, a vision. Whereas after his Bris Milah, so then the level of his nevuah was that of Vayera El of Hashem, which is a higher level. And it's explained over there in the Zohar that the reason for this difference of the level of the nevuah between before and after the Bris Milah was because the Malachi Asharis, they don't understand Lashon Targum. And therefore, before Avram had his Bris Milah, the revelation was on the level of a machazeh, which is in Lashon Targum, which generally we say refers to Aramaic. So it was in Lashon Targum, which they don't understand, in order that the Malachi Asharis shouldn't complain why Hashem is revealing himself to someone who doesn't have a Bris Milah. However, after Avram had a Bris Milah, where the Malachi Asharis now can no longer complain, so then Hashem revealed himself to Avram on the level of Vayera, which is in Lashon HaKodesh, which reflects that it is a higher level. So that's what's explained in the Zohar, that there's these 2 different levels of Nevuah, from before and after the Bris Milah, and the one before Bris Milah was in Lashon Targum, Machazeh, the one after Bris Milah was in Lashon HaKodesh, Vayera, and the reason for this change was because beforehand the Malachim would complain why Avram Avinu is getting this great revelation, so it was done in Lashon Targum, which they don't understand, so that they can't have this complaint. And the question over here is Memanavshach. No matter how we look at it, there's a difficulty with the teaching here in the Zohar. Because if Avram Avinu was deserving, even before the Bris Milah, to the higher Gilui of Vayera Elav Hashem, so why should he lose out because of a concern of a complaint from the Malachim? And we know that Harbe Drachim Alamakim, there are many ways that Hashem has to accomplish things, and so Hashem could arrange both that Avram Avinu would get the Gilui that he deserves, as well as that the Malachim shouldn't complain. And if on the other hand, Avram Avinu wasn't deserving before the Bris Milah to the higher Gilui of Vayera Elav Hashem, so why do we need the reason of being concerned about the Malachi Sharis complaining if he's anyway not deserving of it? So, Memanavshach, no matter how we look at it, there's a difficulty here. If Avram Avinu was deserving, then he should have been given it. And if he wasn't deserving, then there's no need to mention a concern about the Malachi Asheris complaining. He simply didn't deserve it, and that's why he didn't receive it. So this will be understood by first prefacing what's explained in Torah that the difference between Lashon HaKodesh and Lashon Targum, which refers to Aramaic, and all the other languages, the difference is that it's similar to the difference between stones and bricks. A stone is created by Hashem. Hashem created the world and it has stones in it the way he created it. And a brick is made by a person. And similarly, that's the difference between the languages and their letters, between Lashon HaKodesh and all other languages and the letters in Lashon HaKodesh and the letters in all other languages. The letters of the Torah are called stones, because the Torah and its letters is from Hashem. But the languages of the nations are called bricks, because they're just based on the agreement of people. It's a language that was created by people in order that people should be able to communicate information and ideas. And the purpose of these languages, the reason Hashem made the world in such a way that there are these other languages as well, is that they should be nisbarer, they should be refined, and they should be elevated, they should be oila to kedusha through being used for avodas Hashem. So that's what explains in Torah the difference between Lashon HaKodesh and Lashon Targum is the difference that we find between stones and bricks. Lashon HaKodesh is like a stone, it comes from Hashem, and Lashon Targum and all other languages are like a brick that is made by man. Based on this, we can now lead into answering the question that we had in the Zohar. And this is going to be the longest part of the Sicha. I'm going to break it up into 4 parts. This is going to be the lead up into answering the question on the Zohar. So according to what we explained, so we can now explain in the Zohar that the difference between the greatness of Avram Avinu before and after the Milah is similar to the difference between a stone and a brick. What's the connection? It's explained in many places that even though Kiyam Avram Avinu Kala Torah Kula Achalei Nitna, that even though Avram Avinu fulfilled the entire Torah even before it was given, but nevertheless he was only able to reach through his Aveda to the level of Sheresh HaNevraim, the source of creation, because his entire Aveda was with his own Kayach, without a Tzivui, which a Tzivui is also in a Sinas Kayach, to be able to do more. But this was done with his own koyach, without a tzivui and in a sinas koyach from above. And a creation is unable to reach higher than its own source, can't reach higher than Sheresh and Ephraim. However, this was all before he fulfilled the mitzvah of Milah. Whereas when he was commanded by Hashem to do the mitzvah of Milah, that with this tzivui that he was commanded on the mitzvah of Bris Milah, he was given a special koyach from above to arise to a level of bittul and its achdus with Hashem, with the Vayera, with the Creator, who commanded this mitzvah in a higher way than he would otherwise be able to do. And therefore he was able to reach higher than Sheresh and Ephraim, because he got the mitzvah, he got the tzivui, which is in a sinas koyach, to be able to do even more. We can add even more to what we said about bris milah, we can add even more to what it accomplishes. It's not just that through the mitzvah of milah that Avram Avinu rose in his avodah to a level that's infinitely greater than his previous level because he had a tzivui, which is an koyach from Hashem. But even more than this, that through the mitzvah of milah, his entire existence became entirely batal, and he united with Hashem with such an isachta, such a unity, and in such a way that's not found in any other mitzvah. Because that's what defines the mitzvah of bris milah. That's the unique quality of the mitzvah of bris milah, that it's v'hoisa brisi b'bsarchem. So it's a complete and total bittul, that also the physical flesh is part of this. So it permeated his entire existence, his entire being, even his physical body. That's the idea of the bris milah, that also the physical flesh experiences this complete bittul and this achtos. And this is something which we don't find in any other mitzvah. So it comes out that the level of the avodah of Avram, before he fulfilled the mitzvah of milah, where you only reach to the sheirish hanivraim, going back to what we said at the beginning, we can connect it to stones and bricks. So that is similar to the inyan of a brick. That with all of the greatness of his avodah, even though he rose very high, but nevertheless it still didn't leave the realm of being the work of a man, just like a brick. Whereas after you fulfilled the mitzvah of milah, so then he rose in his avodah to a level that's similar to a stone, which is the work of Hashem, something that Hashem made. Because through doing this mitzvah, he went out of his limitations to the extent of being totally batul and bisachtas with Hashem. And based on this, it's understood what we said earlier, that before the mitzvah of milah, the level of Avram Avinu was that of a machzeh, which is lashon targum. Because like we said, it's similar to a brick. His avodah was like that of a brick. It was the avodah of a person, like a brick is made by a person, by man. And also lashon targum, it's a language that's agreed upon by man. But after the mitzvah of bris milah, he reached the level of Vayera, which is lashon hakodesh, similar to a stone, which is made by Hashem. So now his avodah was within a sinus koyach of Hashem, so it's made by Hashem, and that's like the lashon hakodesh of Vayera, which we said he merited a higher revelation of Vayera, which is lashon hakodesh, which is a language of Hashem, which is similar to a stone, which is made by Hashem. Now we're going to take this idea and go and understand it on an even deeper level. So this idea that before the mitzvah of bris milah, Avram Avinu reached the level of a machzeh, and after the mitzvah of bris milah, Avram Avinu reached the level of Vayera, is not just because these two types of gilui, of machzeh and Vayera, and the differences between these two types of gilui, fit with Avram Avinu's two levels of avodah, because of the similarity of his two levels of avodah to a brick and stone. So what we're saying over here is, up to now, the connection we made is somewhat loose, because what we're saying is there were two levels of avodah of Avram Avinu, and there are two levels of gilui, and why does one bring about one and the other one bring about the other? Because this level of avodah and this gilui both fit with the idea of a brick. So therefore, with the avodah of a brick, so to speak, you get the gilui, that's a type of like a brick. And the other avodah is a type of avodah of a stone, and the gilui is a gilui that's similar to a stone, so that avodah brings about the gilui of a stone. So it's a loose connection. It's just because they correspond to a brick and stone, so therefore they're connected to one another. The truth is, but rather also the inner meaning and substance of these two levels in Nevuah fit directly with the two levels of the avodah of Avram Avinu. So in order to understand this, we're going to explain the two different levels of Nevuah and see how they directly connect to these two levels of Avodah. Razal said, Kol HaNeviim nisnabu b'koi, Moisef alei Moshe shenisnabe b'zeh. All the Nevi'im, their Nevuah was on the level of koi, and the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu was on the level of zeh. And it's explained that the difference between them, all the Nevi'im, and Moshe, is that zeh indicates seeing the mohus, the thing itself. And like Razal said, pointing with your finger means you're pointing to the thing itself. That's connected to the word zeh, which is the level of what's spoken about in Gemara of aspaklaria hameira, which is the Gemara says this is the difference between the different nevuas of Moshe and the other neviim, that Moshe was like an aspaklaria meira, which is seeing something through a regular clear piece of glass. So you're seeing the thing itself. Whereas Kai is the level of Aspaklaria She'ena Me'ira. It's a glass that's it's not fully clear. which is not seeing the muhusa. You can't see the thing itself so clearly because the glass is not such a clear piece of glass. And similarly, we can understand the difference between the gilui of a machzeh and the gilui of Vayera. We're going to compare them to koi and zeh. Vayera is the idea of seeing. That's what Vayera means, to see. Meaning that the person having this gilui sees Hashem who appears to him, which is Re'iyas HaMa'os, seeing the essence. Whereas machzeh, so even though machzeh is also seeing, machzeh means a vision, but it's not seeing the essence, but rather only its interpretation. The way a lekus is seen with a levush hamaylim al muhusay. There is something covering over the essence of it. So maybe an example for this would be when somebody is teaching an idea. So a person who can understand the idea itself is getting the experience of Re'iyas HaMa'os. They're actually seeing this idea itself. And someone who's not able to understand it, so it's taught to them with a mashal, with a parable. And then they're able to understand it. But they're understanding it through something which is covering over the essence. So that's the difference between the nevuah of Koi and the nevuah of Zeh. And therefore, now we're going to connect it. Now that we understand these two different levels of nevuah, one is Re'iyas HaMa'os, seeing the mohus, and the other one is not seeing the mohus. We're going to connect it to the two levels of Avodah of Avram Avinu before and after Bris Milah. So therefore, before the mitzvah of Bris Milah, when Avram Avinu didn't yet reach a Bris Olam B'Psarchem with Elikus, he wasn't one with Elikus. So naturally, he didn't merit seeing the essence of Elikus. He only reached his capacity. He didn't get to being one with Elikus, so he's not going to see the essence, the mohus itself. Whereas afterwards, when he became completely batal and bisachtas with Hashem, and like we said, all the way down into his physical flesh, so he rose to a higher level that Hashem appeared to him on the level of Vayera, seeing the essence, seeing the mohus of Elikus, because then he had that total bittul and isachtas and unity with Elikus. So that is the level of Re'iyas HaMahus. So we see how the two levels of Avodah directly connect to the two levels of revelation that Avram Avinu received of Machzeh and Vayera. Now we're up to the final step in the lead up, and from this we're going to lead into the answer on the question that we had on the Zohar. So this high level of Re'iyas HaMahus, seeing the Mahus of Elikus, that is reached through the mitzvah of Bris Milah, is only possible by Yidden, because it was specifically given to Yidden this koyach of rising to this level of Re'iyas HaMahus through the Avodah of Torah mitzvahs in general, and specifically through the mitzvah of Bris Milah. So this was given specifically to Yidden. And that's why the Torah was given specifically to the Yidden, despite the complaint of the Malachim that Hashem should keep the Torah in Shemayim. And Hashem answered, Yitzhahara yesh b'nechem, l'Mitzrayim yiradatem. Do you have a Yitzhahara? Did you go down to Mitzrayim? Since it's specifically because Yitzhahara yesh b'nechem, and the Yidden going down to Mitzrayim, which represents limitations and boundaries, which all of this, the Yitzhahara and the Mitzrayim, is all Nizbarer and Oila through the Avodah of Torah mitzvahs, that Yidden have the ability to reach this high level of Re'iyas HaMahus. Not so the Malachim, who even though they have complete bittul to Hashem, and their avodah is on a very high level, v'chulu, but nevertheless they don't have the koyach to rise higher than the sherish and avrim. That's what they're limited by. So this whole koyach that we're talking about of Re'iyas HaMahus is given specifically to Yidden, and it's given to Yidden in the Torah and mitzvahs in general, in the mitzvah of Bris Milah specifically, and it's through the mitzvahs and the Bris Milah that we are mevarer and we elevate all of these things to Kedusha, and that gives us the ability to reach and connect to this high level of Re'iyas HaMahus. According to all of this, we can now answer the question that we had on the Zohar. The question was that if Avram Avinu deserved the Gilui of Vayera, so why should it be taken away from him because of the complaint of the Malachim? And if he didn't deserve it, so then why do we have to say it's because of the complaint of the Malachim? It's because he didn't deserve it. It has nothing to do with the Malachim. According to everything that we learned, so we can now explain why the Gilui on the level of Vayera cannot be given to Avram before he fulfilled the mitzvah of Bris Milah, because of the complaint of the Malachim. It doesn't mean to say that the concern of the Malachim complaining was a side reason that didn't allow him to have this Gilui. Really, he deserved it, but because of this side reason, he wasn't able to be given the Gilui. But rather, the complaint of the Malachim itself is a proof that Avram is not fitting for this Gilui. Meaning, since before his bris milah, despite his great avodah and his aliyah, his rising up in kedusha, and his bittul telekus v'chulu, etc., he didn't yet leave the realm of being a nivra. If so, that means that his level is similar to the level of malachim, which cannot reach higher than the sherish and Ephraim. And so, like them, he too cannot receive this Gililikus on the level of Vayera. So the complaining of the Malachim is a reflection and an expression of a certain truth, that Avram Avinu is just like them, and therefore doesn't deserve this higher Gili. So it's not that he deserved it, he didn't deserve it, but what is it expressed in? It's expressed in the complaint of the Malachim, because the Malachim are essentially saying that Avram Avinu is just like them, and therefore shouldn't get something more than what they're able to get. So the complaint of the Malachim is an indication of the fact that Avram Avinu didn't deserve this higher level of Vayera. Now we can come back to the very beginning of the Sicha, where we said that there are two Avedas of Avram, one before Bris Milah and one after Bris Milah, one in Parshas Lech Lecha and one in Parshas Vayera, and that this difference is reflected in the names of the Parshas Lech Lecha and Vayera. According to all of this, we can understand why the two Parshas of Lech Lecha and Vayera are divided into two, and why one is called Lech Lecha and one Vayera, and now it hints to the two levels of Avram Avinu, to the Aveda of Avram Avinu. The idea of Lech Lecha is that a person is going and leaving their previous level in all its details and aspects. Like it says, Me'artzecha, Umi Me'latetecha, Umi Beis Avicha, which includes all the details of leaving one's limitations and rising above, rising Lamaila in the level of Bittul to Hashem. However, all the levels that a person is going out of, it's all an organized halicha. Like it says, the destination is Lecha, to the person themselves. And so Avram didn't reach higher than the source of Nevrayim. It was all within what he was capable of. It was organized system. One level is relatively higher than the next level. And so it's all within the confines of what a Nivra is capable of doing. That's what Lech Lecha represents. Not so Vayera, which indicates seeing Re'iyas HaMohus, seeing the Mohus, the essence of Elokus, which comes through totalis achdus with Hashem, and Avram Avinu reached this level specifically, like we explained, through the mitzvah of Bris Milah. And so that's why the life of Avram Avinu is divided into two parshias, one before the mitzvah of Bris Milah and one after the mitzvah of Bris Milah, because it represents the two types of Avodah that Avram Avinu did, the one before Bris Milah and the one after Bris Milah, one which was within the realm of what a Niver could accomplish, and a person can only reach to Sherish and Ephraim, and that's reflected in the name Lech Lecha, that the Lech is Lecha, it's to you, as much as a person is able to do. And the other one is reflected in the name Vayera, which is seeing the Mohus, Riyas Mohus, which that was accomplished after the mitzvah of Bris Milah. We know that Maisa Ovis Simin Labanim. So it's understood that there is a Hayra from all of this for each and every one, and especially when we're discussing the mitzvah of Bris Milah, which the Rambam writes about it, that each and every one is Nimel, gets a Bris Milah, K'moishem al Avram Avinu alav Shalom. It's directly connected to Avram Avinu. So just like Avram, that with all of his alichus and aliyas, he still didn't reach to the Shleimus Aveda until he fulfilled the mitzvah of Bris Milah, and only then was he given from above, Milmaila, the Gilui, on the level of Vayera. So too, each and every one has to know, not to be satisfied with their Avodah, even if it's in the highest way, but rather one must constantly rise higher and higher until reaching true and complete Bittul. Because even when one reached the level of Re'iyas Elikus, of seeing Elikus, it's possible that it's on the level of a Machzeh and not the level of Vayera. And on the other hand, there's the Haftacha, the promise, that when a person does their Avodah to the extent of their ability, so they will give him from above Milmaila the highest Giluyim, even the ultimate greatest Gilui of Vayera, seeing Elikus to the level of Aspaklaria Hameira, which is the Re'iyas HaMahus, seeing the essence of Elikus.